"You're not welcome at the party anymore, Cathy. I've already sent the cancellation to your invitation." The words came through my phone speaker as I stood in our kitchen, frosting the anniversary cake I'd spent 3 hours baking. My mother-in-law Beatrice's voice carried that particular tone of satisfaction she reserved for moments when she believed she'd won something. "I'm sorry, what?" I asked, setting down my piping bag carefully. "The anniversary celebration tomorrow. It's family only now. You understand." She paused. "Besides, someone more suitable will be there to stand beside my son." My hands remained steady as I wiped them on my apron. After 6 years of marriage to her son Wesley, I'd learned to recognize Beatrice's schemes. But this one felt different, bolder, more desperate. "I see," I replied calmly. "Does Wesley know about this decision?" "Wesley agrees completely. He'll explain everything tomorrow." Her voice practically dripped with triumph. "Goodbye, Cathy." The call ended. I looked at the cake, at the elegant decorations I'd prepared, and allowed myself a small smile. What Beatrice didn't know was that I'd been expecting something like this for weeks. "My name is Cathy Foster, and I'm 32 years old. 6 years ago, I married Wesley Foster, believing I'd found my partner for life. His mother, Beatrice, had seemed pleasant enough during our courtship, though she'd made subtle comments about Wesley deserving someone from a better background. I came from a working-class family. My parents owned a small bakery in the downtown district. Beatrice came from old money and never let anyone forget it. She'd expected Wesley to marry Simone Bradshaw, the daughter of her closest friend, who came from the same social circle. When Wesley chose me instead, Beatrice's mask slipped. The subtle comments became pointed remarks. The polite suggestions became demands. But I'd built a successful career as a financial analyst, contributed equally to our household, and genuinely loved my husband. Or so I thought. 3 weeks ago, I'd noticed Wesley's behavior changing. More evening, work meetings, secretive phone calls, a sudden interest in getting back in shape. Then I'd seen the credit card statement with charges to expensive restaurants I'd never visited. That's when I started paying closer attention. The morning after Beatrice's call, I woke early and got dressed in my best navy suit. Wesley had already left for an emergency meeting at the office, which was convenient since our anniversary party was scheduled for that evening. I drove to the law offices of Martinez and Associates, where I'd had an appointment scheduled for a week. Patricia Martinez greeted me with a professional handshake and a knowing look. She'd handled 3 similar cases this year alone. "You said you had documentation," she asked as we settled into her office. I pulled out a folder containing printouts of credit card statements, screenshots of text messages I'd found on Wesley's laptop, and a detailed timeline of his whereabouts over the past month. Everything pointed to rekindled involvement with Simone Bradshaw, who had conveniently returned to town after her own divorce 3 months ago. "This is thorough," Patricia observed, flipping through the pages. "I work in financial analysis," I replied. "Documentation is what I do." What I didn't tell her was that I'd also discovered something else, something that would make this afternoon's party very interesting. The party was scheduled for 3 o'clock at Beatrice's estate, a sprawling property she'd inherited from her own parents. I'd spent countless holidays there, always feeling slightly out of place among the antiques and formal gardens. At 2:30, I received a text from Wesley. "Mom explained everything. This is for the best. Please don't make a scene." I didn't respond. Instead, I finished getting ready, choosing an elegant burgundy dress I'd bought specifically for this occasion. Not the dress I'd originally planned to wear. That one was still hanging in our closet. This one was a statement. My phone buzzed with messages from confused friends and family members. "Why aren't you at your own anniversary party? Did something happen? Beatrice said the party was family only." I sent the same response to everyone. "Just wait, you'll understand soon." At exactly 3 o'clock, I parked 2 blocks away from the estate and made my way to the service entrance. Beatrice's longtime housekeeper, Mrs. Flores, was waiting for me. She'd worked for the family for 30 years and had never approved of how Beatrice treated me. "Thank you," I whispered as she let me in through the kitchen door. From my position near the back hallway, I could see into the main reception room where the party was in full swing. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above elegantly dressed guests. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Everything was perfect, exactly as Beatrice had planned it. Except for one detail. Wesley stood near the fireplace, looking uncomfortable in his tailored suit. Beside him, laughing at something Beatrice was saying, stood Simone Bradshaw. She wore an emerald dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary, her blonde hair styled in perfect waves. They looked like they belonged together, which was exactly what Beatrice had always wanted. I watched as Beatrice clinked a knife against her champagne glass, calling for attention. The room quieted, all eyes turning toward her and the couple by the fireplace. "Thank you all for coming," Beatrice began, her voice carrying that rehearsed warmth she used for social occasions. "We're here to celebrate 6 wonderful years and to announce some exciting changes." Wesley shifted uncomfortably. Simone placed a manicured hand on his arm. I pulled out my phone and sent a single text message. Then I waited. "As many of you know," Beatrice continued, "my son Wesley has been going through a transitional period. Sometimes we marry for the wrong reasons to the wrong people." She paused dramatically. "But it's never too late to correct our mistakes." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some guests looked confused. Others, mostly Beatrice's close friends, nodded knowingly. They'd been in on the plan. "Wesley has reconnected with someone very special," Beatrice went on, gesturing toward Simone. "Someone who shares our family values, our background, our understanding of what truly matters." I checked my phone. The reply had come. "On my way, 2 minutes." Wesley finally spoke up, his voice uncertain. "Mom, maybe we should." "Nonsense," Beatrice cut him off. "Everyone here supports you making the right choice." She raised her glass. "To new beginnings and to the woman who should have been part of this family from the start, to Simone." Several glasses raised. Not everyone joined the toast. Some guests looked distinctly uncomfortable. That's when the front doorbell rang. Mrs. Chen moved to answer it. But I was already walking out of the hallway and into the main room. Every head turned toward me as I appeared, my burgundy dress a stark contrast to Simone's emerald green. "Don't bother, Mrs. Chen," I said calmly. "I know who it is." Beatrice's face went white, then red. "What are you doing here? You weren't invited." "Actually," I replied, walking toward the center of the room, "this is my anniversary party. You may have tried to uninvite me, but legally speaking, you can't ban someone from a celebration held in their honor." Wesley stared at me, looking trapped. Simone's confident smile faltered. The doorbell rang again, more insistently this time. "That would be my attorney," I announced to the room. "Patricia Martinez from Martinez and Associates. I invited her to witness what I'm about to share with everyone here." Mrs. Flores opened the door, and Patricia walked in carrying a leather briefcase. She nodded professionally at me, then surveyed the room with the calm confidence of someone who'd seen everything. "What is the meaning of this?" Beatrice demanded, her voice shrill. I pulled out a small remote control from my purse. "I thought we should all see something interesting before any more toasts are made." The large television screen mounted above the fireplace flickered to life. I'd spent the previous evening editing together footage from several sources. Security cameras I'd installed in our home 3 weeks ago, screenshots of text messages, and even a few recordings from my phone. The first image showed Wesley and Simone at an expensive restaurant. The timestamp read 2 weeks before our anniversary. "Oh, Wesley," Simone's voice came through clearly. "Once you're free of her, we can finally be together like we should have been all along." Wesley's response, "Mom's handling everything. The party will be the perfect opportunity." The room erupted in murmurs. I clicked to the next clip. This one showed Beatrice and Simone in what appeared to be a coffee shop, their heads bent together conspiratorially. "I've already drafted the narrative," Beatrice was saying. We'll say the marriage was a mistake from the beginning. My friends will support Wesley completely. Annabel will look like the outsider she's always been." Simone laughed. "And once the divorce goes through, Wesley inherits the trust fund you've been holding. Perfect timing." I paused the video and turned to face the crowd. "Let me clarify for everyone here," I said, my voice steady and clear. "My mother-in-law didn't just plan to exclude me from my own anniversary party. She orchestrated an entire scheme to publicly humiliate me while announcing my husband's affair." Wesley finally found his voice. "Cathy, it's not what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like," I interrupted. "You've been planning to divorce me so you could access your trust fund, which, according to your grandmother's will, only becomes available to you after 6 years of marriage." I looked directly at Beatrice. "Your mother found a loophole. The trust specifies 6 years of marriage, but not 6 years with the same person." The room went completely silent. Patricia stepped forward. "What Mrs. Foster is explaining is that there was a plan to divorce her immediately after the 6-year anniversary, allowing Wesley to access approximately $12 million in trust funds. He would then be free to marry Ms. Bradshaw, with his mother's full financial and social support." Beatrice's face had gone from red to purple. "You can't prove any of this." "Actually," I replied calmly, "I can. The security footage is time-stamped. The text messages are all backed up, and your own words are recorded." I clicked the remote again. This time, the screen showed a text message conversation between Beatrice and Wesley from 4 months ago. "Beatrice, Simone is perfect for you. She understands our world." "Wesley, I'm married, Mom." "Beatrice, a temporary situation. Once you hit the 6-year mark, the trust opens. Then you can finally correct your mistake." "Wesley, what about Cathy?" "Beatrice, I'll handle her. She's not one of us. She never was." The guests began whispering among themselves. Some looked shocked. Others looked disgusted. A few of Beatrice's close friends quietly set down their champagne glasses and moved toward the exit. Simone, sensing the shifting mood, tried to salvage the situation. "This is ridiculous. Wesley and I reconnected naturally. We haven't done anything wrong." "Except plan to defraud me in a divorce settlement," I replied. "Except conspire to publicly humiliate me. Except participate in a scheme to access money through manipulation." I turned to Patricia. "How does the law view this kind of coordination?" Patricia smiled grimly. "Conspiracy to commit fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and depending on how the trust is worded, potentially criminal fraud." Wesley finally stepped away from Simone, his face pale. "Cathy, please, can we talk about this privately?" "No," I said firmly. "You wanted a public announcement. Beatrice planned this entire party for maximum social impact. Well, here's my public response." I pulled out a folder from my bag and handed copies to Patricia, who began distributing them to interested guests. "These are divorce papers," I announced. "I filed them this morning. The grounds are adultery with supporting documentation. I'm also filing a civil suit against Beatrice for intentional interference with my marriage and emotional distress." Beatrice lurched forward. "You can't do this. This is my home." "And this is my life," I replied. "The life you tried to destroy for your own convenience." I looked around at the assembled guests. How many of you were told I was unstable, that I was making Wesley unhappy, that the marriage was a mistake? Several people had the grace to look ashamed. Others avoided my gaze entirely. "That was the narrative Beatrice prepared," I continued. "Paint me as the problem, make Wesley the victim, clear the path for Simone." My phone buzzed. It was a message from my father. "We're outside whenever you're ready." I looked at Wesley one more time. 6 years of marriage. 6 years of trying to fit into his world, of enduring Beatrice's subtle cruelty, of believing that love would be enough. "I loved you," I said quietly, though in the silent room everyone could hear. "I really did, but you were always too weak to stand up to your mother and too selfish to see what you were throwing away." Wesley's eyes filled with tears. Too late for that now. I turned to the gathered crowd. The party's over, but before you all leave, I want you to understand something. I came from a working-class family. My parents owned a bakery. I worked my way through college, built a career, contributed equally to this marriage. I paused, but none of that mattered to Beatrice because I didn't come from the right background. Several guests nodded. One woman called out, "We never thought you weren't good enough, Cassie." "Thank you," I replied, "but it's time for me to move forward with people who actually value me." Patricia closed her briefcase. "I'll be in touch with your attorney, Mr. Foster," she said formally to Wesley. "I suggest you get good representation. This won't be a simple divorce." As I walked toward the door, Simone called out desperately, "Wesley, say something. Don't let her leave like this." Wesley just stood there, silent and defeated. The trust fund that had seemed so appealing now came with a price he hadn't anticipated: public humiliation and legal consequences. Beatrice tried one last time. "If you leave here, you'll have nothing. Wesley will make sure of it." I stopped and turned back. "Actually, Beatrice, I'll have quite a lot. I own half of our house, which I have documentation proving I contributed to equally. I have my career and my savings, which I kept separate from joint accounts specifically because I never fully trusted your son." I smiled. "And I have something else you don't have: my dignity." Outside, my parents waited by their car. My mother hugged me immediately. "How did it go?" my father asked. "Exactly as planned," I replied. Though I admit, seeing Beatrice's face when the videos started playing was even better than I'd imagined. My mother laughed through her tears. "That's my girl, always thorough." We drove away from the estate, leaving behind the party, the shocked guests, and the life I'd tried so hard to build with someone who'd never truly valued me. The next few days brought a media circus I hadn't quite anticipated. Someone at the party had recorded portions of my presentation and posted it online. By Monday morning, "Anniversary Party Revenge" was trending on multiple social media platforms. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive. Women shared their own stories of manipulation and betrayal. People praised my documentation and preparation. A few criticized me for public humiliation, but most agreed that Beatrice and Wesley had gotten exactly what they'd planned for me. Several news outlets reached out for interviews. I declined them all, issuing a simple statement through Patricia: "I'm focusing on moving forward with my life and career." What I didn't mention publicly was the flood of job offers I'd received. Apparently, a financial analyst who could document fraud so thoroughly was in high demand. 3 different firms had contacted me with positions that came with significant salary increases. Wesley tried calling 17 times. I blocked his number. Beatrice attempted to visit my office but was turned away by security. Simone, interestingly, had gone completely silent. According to mutual acquaintances, she'd left town immediately after the party. My lawyer called with updates. Wesley's attorney is pushing for mediation. They want to settle quickly and quietly. "No," I said firmly. "This goes to court, everything documented, everything public record." 2 weeks after the party, I met with Patricia to review our case strategy. The evidence we'd compiled painted a clear picture of conspiracy and fraud. "The trust fund complicates things," Patricia explained. "Wesley technically has access to it now, but given the circumstances, we're arguing that his access was obtained through fraudulent misrepresentation." "Explain," I said. "The trust specified 6 years of marriage, presumably to ensure stability and maturity. Your grandmother-in-law intended it to benefit a strong, committed union." Patricia pulled out documents. But Wesley and Beatrice deliberately waited until the exact 6-year mark to execute their plan. That suggests the marriage itself was maintained under false pretenses. I hadn't considered that angle. So we're arguing that Wesley never intended to honor the marriage. Exactly. The text messages between him and his mother going back 4 months show clear premeditation. They were counting down to the 6-year anniversary specifically to access the money. The implications were significant. If we could prove that Wesley had maintained the marriage solely for financial gain, it could affect not just the divorce settlement, but potentially his access to the trust itself. "There's more," Patricia continued. "I've been investigating Beatrice's finances. She's deeply in debt." Patricia spread several documents across her desk. Bank statements, property liens, and credit reports painted a picture I hadn't seen before. "Your mother-in-law has been maintaining an illusion of wealth," Patricia explained. "The estate is mortgaged to the limit. She has significant credit card debt. Her investment portfolio has been liquidated over the past 3 years." I stared at the numbers, my financial analyst mind quickly calculating. She's been living on borrowed money and family reputation. Exactly. And her plan was to have Wesley access his trust fund, which she expected to manage through her influence over him. With Simone as his wife, someone she could control, Beatrice would effectively have access to $12 million. Everything suddenly made more sense. This wasn't just about Beatrice disapproving of me. It was about her financial survival. "Does Wesley know?" I asked. "Based on the documents I've reviewed, no. Beatrice kept her financial situation hidden from everyone, including her son." I sat back, processing this new information. Beatrice's cruelty hadn't just been about social status. It had been about money, about maintaining her lifestyle at any cost, even if it meant destroying her son's marriage. "Can we use this?" I asked. Patricia smiled. "Absolutely." The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. I dressed in a professional charcoal suit, my hair pulled back in a neat bun. Patricia had advised me to look competent and composed, the opposite of the unstable, inferior wife Beatrice had tried to paint me as. Wesley arrived with his attorney, a distinguished older man named Harold Pemberton who specialized in protecting wealthy families. He looked at me with the polite condescension of someone who expected an easy victory. That was his first mistake. Judge Catherine Morrison presided, a woman known for her no-nonsense approach to family law. She reviewed the preliminary documents with careful attention, occasionally making notes. "Mrs. Foster," she said, looking at me over her reading glasses, "you're alleging conspiracy to commit fraud, adultery, and intentional infliction of emotional distress." "Yes, Your Honor," I replied calmly. "That's quite a list." Patricia stood. "Your Honor, we have extensive documentation supporting each claim. Video evidence, text messages, testimony from witnesses who were present at the anniversary party, and financial records showing premeditation." Judge Morrison turned to Wesley's attorney. "Mr. Pemberton, response." Harold stood smoothly. "Your Honor." My client made a mistake in judgment regarding his personal life. However, conspiracy and fraud are serious allegations that require substantial proof. Judge Morrison looked at Patricia. "Ms. Martinez, do you have this substantial proof?" "Yes, Your Honor." Patricia pulled out a tablet and approached the bench. "With your permission, I'd like to show you a timeline we've constructed." The judge gestured her forward. For the next 10 minutes, Patricia walked through our evidence. Text messages showing premeditation. Financial records proving Wesley had begun hiding assets 4 months before the anniversary. Video footage from the party showing Beatrice and Simone's coordination. Wesley shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Harold's confident expression began to crack. "Your Honor," Patricia continued, "we're also prepared to present evidence that Mrs. Beatrice Foster, the defendant's mother, has significant financial motivations beyond simply preferring a different daughter-in-law. She's been insolvent for 3 years and was counting on accessing her son's trust fund through her influence over him." Harold stood quickly. "Your Honor, Mrs. Beatrice Foster is not a party to this divorce proceeding." "Not yet," Patricia replied smoothly. "But we're filing a separate civil suit against her for intentional interference with marriage. That case will proceed independently." Judge Morrison looked at Wesley directly. "Mr. Foster, did you maintain your marriage primarily to access a trust fund?" Wesley's face went pale. His attorney leaned over to whisper urgently in his ear. After a moment, Wesley spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I loved my wife at first, but over time my mother convinced me we weren't compatible. When I reconnected with Simone, I thought—" He stopped, seeming to realize how his words sounded. "You thought what?" Judge Morrison prompted. "I thought I could have both the trust fund and the life my mother wanted for me," Wesley admitted. His attorney closed his eyes in defeat. The courtroom went silent. Wesley had just confirmed exactly what we needed. Judge Morrison made some notes, then looked up. "Here's my preliminary ruling. Given the evidence of premeditation and the defendant's own admission that financial considerations influenced the timing of this divorce, I'm freezing all trust fund assets pending the outcome of the full hearing." Harold stood quickly. "Your Honor, that trust fund has specific terms, which include provisions about the character and intentions of the beneficiary," Judge Morrison interrupted. "Mr. Foster's grandmother clearly intended the money to support a stable, genuine marriage. If that marriage was maintained under false pretenses, the trust's purpose has been violated." Wesley looked like he might be sick. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I'm ordering full financial disclosure from both parties. Mr. Foster, you will provide complete documentation of all assets, accounts, and financial dealings for the past 6 years." As we left the courthouse, Patricia squeezed my arm. That went even better than I expected. Wesley admitting his motivations on record was a gift. I felt lighter than I had in months. What happens now? Full discovery. We'll get access to everything. Bank accounts, property records, communications. And with the trust frozen, Wesley and Beatrice lose their leverage. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I opened it. "You've destroyed everything. I hope you're proud." It was from Beatrice. I showed Patricia, who snorted. "Save that. It's more evidence of her vindictive behavior." We walked to a nearby cafe where my parents were waiting. My mother hugged me immediately. "How did it go?" she asked. "The trust fund is frozen, and Wesley basically confessed in court," I replied. "The judge saw through everything." My father smiled with quiet satisfaction. "Your grandmother would be proud. She always said you had more strength than you realized." That evening, I returned to my apartment, the place I'd moved to immediately after the anniversary party. It was smaller than the house Wesley and I had shared, but it was mine. Completely mine. I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. Over the next several weeks, discovery revealed even more damaging information. Wesley had been hiding money in separate accounts. Beatrice had been using her son's credit cards to pay her own expenses. Simone had received several expensive gifts charged to Wesley's personal accounts, including a car and jewelry. The evidence painted such a clear picture of coordination and fraud that Harold Pemberton quietly approached Patricia about settlement. "They want this to go away," Patricia told me during a meeting. "Wesley is willing to give you a very generous settlement if we agree to seal the records." "No sealing," I said immediately. "Public record, everything." Patricia smiled. "I thought you'd say that. I already told them." The counteroffer came back within hours. Wesley would give me 60% of all marital assets, including the house. He would pay my legal fees, and he would sign a statement acknowledging his fraud and manipulation. "And the trust fund?" I asked. "Still frozen pending the outcome of a separate hearing. But here's the interesting part." Patricia pulled out another document. "Wesley's grandmother's will include a morality clause. If the beneficiary is found to have acted in bad faith or violated the trust's intent, the money goes to charity instead." I blinked. So Wesley might lose it entirely. Very possible. The trust's executors are reviewing all our evidence. 3 months after the anniversary party, the final divorce hearing took place. The courtroom was packed with people who'd followed the case through social media and news reports. I'd become something of an accidental symbol, a woman who'd refused to be quietly discarded. Wesley looked terrible. He'd lost weight, had dark circles under his eyes, and seemed smaller somehow. Simone was notably absent. According to sources, she'd moved to another state and blocked all communication with Wesley once the money problems became clear. Judge Morrison reviewed the settlement terms. "Mr. Foster, You're agreeing to give your wife 60% of all marital assets, pay all legal fees, and sign a statement acknowledging your fraudulent behavior during the marriage." "Yes, Your Honor," Wesley mumbled. "And you understand this statement will be part of the public record?" "Yes." "Mrs. Foster, are you satisfied with these terms?" I stood. "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Morrison signed the documents. "This divorce is granted. Mr. Foster, I hope you've learned something from this experience about the value of honesty and integrity." Wesley didn't respond. As we left the courthouse, reporters waited outside. I'd agreed to give one statement, just one, and then I wanted to move on with my life. I stood before the cameras and spoke clearly. No one deserves to be treated as disposable. No one deserves to be manipulated or used. I hope my story encourages others to value themselves enough to walk away from people who don't appreciate them. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I accepted a position as Director of Financial Analysis at a prestigious firm. The salary was substantial, the work challenging, and my colleagues treated me with genuine respect. I'd bought a small house near my parents' bakery, a cozy place with a garden where I could think and plan. The settlement money had given me security, but more importantly, the experience had given me clarity. I heard through mutual connections that Beatrice had been forced to sell her estate. The debts had finally caught up with her, and without access to Wesley's trust fund, she couldn't maintain the illusion anymore. She'd moved to a modest apartment and rarely appeared in social circles. Wesley, I learned, was working a regular job for the first time in his life. The trust fund had indeed been revoked due to the morality clause, the $12 million distributed to several charities. He'd tried to contest it, but the evidence of fraud and manipulation had been overwhelming. Simone had apparently married someone else, a genuinely wealthy older man who didn't need to wait for an inheritance. As for me, I was thriving. I'd joined a book club, reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during my marriage, and even started dating again, though nothing serious. The best revenge, I'd discovered, wasn't the courtroom victory or the public vindication. It was building a life so fulfilling that I barely thought about them anymore. One afternoon, almost a year after that anniversary party, I was having coffee with my mother at my parents' bakery. The familiar smell of fresh bread and pastries brought back childhood memories. "You seem happy," my mother observed, studying my face. "I am," I replied honestly, "really happy for the first time in years." "Any regrets?" I thought about that. I regret staying as long as I did. I should have seen the signs earlier, but I don't regret how I handled the end. My mother squeezed my hand. "You were always our strong girl. We knew you'd land on your feet." My phone buzzed with an email. It was from a young woman who'd seen my story online. She wrote about her own situation, trapped in a marriage where she felt undervalued and manipulated. She asked for advice. I wrote back, "Document everything, value yourself, and remember that leaving isn't failure. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you can do." That evening, I sat in my garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. A year ago, I'd been standing in my kitchen, listening to Beatrice tell me I wasn't welcome at my own anniversary party. Now I was free, truly free. Sometimes I thought about that sealed envelope Bianca had handed Gregory in the story I'd once read, the one that had inspired me to plan so carefully. I'd done something similar, except my envelope had been full of documentation, evidence, and preparation. The anniversary party had been Beatrice's attempt to publicly erase me. Instead, it became the stage for my refusal to disappear quietly. I'd learned important lessons through the experience. That love without respect is worthless. That financial independence is crucial. That family doesn't excuse cruelty. And that sometimes the people who underestimate you give you the greatest gift of all, the motivation to prove them wrong. Wesley had called once, months after everything ended. I'd let it go to voicemail. His message was rambling, apologetic, full of regrets. He said he missed me, that he'd made a terrible mistake, that his mother had manipulated him. I deleted it without a second thought. Some bridges don't need to be rebuilt. Some endings are meant to be permanent. As I sat in my peaceful garden, in my own house, living my own life on my own terms, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not just happiness, but peace. Beatrice had wanted to introduce her son to someone more suitable at that party. Instead, I'd introduced myself to everyone there as someone who refused to be dismissed. Someone who valued herself enough to fight back. Someone who understood that the best way to win isn't revenge, but walking away with your dignity intact and building something better. The anniversary party had been meant to end my story. Instead, it marked the beginning of the life I was always meant to have. And that life, built on my own terms with people who genuinely valued me, was better than anything Wesley or Beatrice could have imagined.